Comprehensive planning for student success. Self-determination, Module 2, Lesson 1. Again, I'll start off with just a bit of humor. That's right. In this module, we're going to be learning about what it means to be self-determined. You may already know the basics, right? A student having the ability and opportunity to make choices, decisions, set goals, enact a plan, and self-manage. Additionally, we have to have an environment where the student can be successful in order for them to be motivated. My nephew recently suggested I read a book called The Boy Who Harnessed the Wind by William Kamkwamba. I accepted his suggestion and read the book. The film synopsis on Google describes it as a story of a 13-year-old boy thrown out of school, one that he loves, because his family can no longer afford the fees. But he sneaks into the library and learns how to build a windmill to save his village from a famine. Because he decided to do this, he was shamed, laughed at, and scolded for searching junkyards for materials and climbing dangerous self-made towers. Even his mom made fun of him, saying that he needed to get married and no one was going to marry a crazy man. Well, the author, William Kamkwamba, is that 13-year-old boy, and this is based on a true story. William brought electricity to his home so that they could have light after dark and a pump to irrigate their farm. This exemplifies to me that not only do we have to get a reward in order to behave, but sometimes we're motivated and self-determined because we know it's in our best interest. So I want you to think more broadly about self-determination as you progress through this module and realize that there are many facets to self-determination, some that are coming from within us based on our experiences and opportunities, and others how the environment is set up around us. And as educators, this is an opportunity for us to support our students so that they can both act according to their interests, so that they can achieve their own goals, and also behave in such a way that is in their best interest. According to a study and report by the National Center for Special Education Research, or IES, students with disabilities earned, on average, 22.7 credits during their time in high school. Academic courses accounted for an average of 12.7 credits, vocational courses accounted for an average of 4.5 credits, and other courses that were neither academic nor vocational, such as PE or life skills, counted for an average of 5.7 credits. Students with disabilities averaged fewer credits than their peers in the general population, 22.7 versus 24.2. Whereas the coursework of students in general population was focused more heavily on academic courses compared to that of students with disabilities. 16.1 academic credits versus 12.7. Students with disabilities earn more vocational and non-academic, non-vocational credits than students in the general population. On average, students with disabilities who attended typical high schools earned 16.7 credits in general education courses and 6.1 credits in special education courses. That's 72% and 28% of their overall credits, respectively. More than 1/4 of secondary school students with disabilities spent all of their course time and earned all of their credits in general education courses there, whereas 3% of students with disabilities earned their credits in the special education setting. On average, students with disabilities who received grades earned a 2.3 GPA on a 4.0 scale, a lower GPA than that of the general population. Approximately 6% of students with disabilities had GPAs of 3.35 or higher, mostly A's and B's. But that's in comparison to 20% of the students in general population. 11% of students with disabilities had GPAs lower than 1.25, which is mostly Ds, compared to 1% of the general population. This is not to say that students with disabilities aren't successful in schools. And students with disabilities are also successful in post-school activities. But what are the predictors for that success? The National Secondary Transition Technical Assistance Center, Kaleems and Morningstar 2011, tells us the predictors for post-school success. You can see the list here. I imagine it's not too surprising. And although paid employment and work experience before graduation was the #1 predictor of post-school success, quite honestly, I believe it takes a better developed self-advocacy and self-determination to land those experiences and be successful in them. So how are we going to support the students across the lifespan to develop that self-advocacy and self-determination to be able to engage in these other activities which are predictors for post-school success? Here, in these next 2 modules, we are going to focus on self-determination and self-advocacy. What is self-determination? The ultimate goal of education? A critical component of enabling students to experience a successful transition into adulthood? Contrary to previous research indicating that IQ correlated with self-determination, actually, it only applied to students with severe intellectual disabilities. When analyzing the predictors of high and low levels of self-determination, Weimeyer and Garner, 2003, found that levels of intelligence were not a significant contributor. Instead, having opportunities to make choices within one's environment was the only significant predictor of self-determination. Students must have environmental opportunities to develop self-determination. Additionally, self-advocacy is a related term used interchangeably with self-determination. But more specifically, self-advocacy refers to taking action on one's own behalf, which leads to self-determination. In plain English, self-determination is knowing who you are, which is self-discovery. Knowing what you want by exploring new things and figuring out what works and what doesn't work, and knowing how to get there, which involves goal setting, understanding your strengths and challenges, and how to ask for the supports that you need. This is a combination of so many skills. It seems simple at first, but when you think about all of those skills and activities, it can feel like maybe there's more to it than what all people could just pick up intuitively. Earlier, you were asked to identify 3 things you were good at and 3 things you were not good at. Was it hard or easy for you to come up with these 3 things? Think about how difficult this can be for students and how knowing this about themselves through the concepts of self-determination can help the students be more successful in their participation. I hope this activity helped you visualize how self-determination is the foundation of a student-led IEP and is the key to participation. Here we have a list of self-determination skills as identified by Weimeyer and Field, 2 of the experts in the field of self-determination in regard to education. Their work stems from University of Kansas and Vanderbilt University. This is quite a long list, but a worthwhile list of points to support with our students. To break this down in terms of acquiring and developing self-determination skills, there are essential characteristics of self-determination that have been identified. First, we have psychological empowerment. This is self-efficiency, or a perceived self-control. You can think about how the environment and previous experiences play into this. Perhaps you've heard of learned helplessness. Repeated failure causes students to no longer be motivated to try. However, a perceived control and a self-efficacy can encourage a student and motivate a student to be more self-determined and to take action. This is where we think about person-centered planning. Autonomy. This is the formation of an individual's identity and being independent, acting according to their own preferences, interests, abilities, free from external influence. Student-led IEPs with a focus on transition goals help a student focus on forming this identity. Self-realization is knowing one's strengths and what one is capable of. Acting on that knowledge to capitalize on strengths helps a student be self-realized. It's influenced by the evaluation of others and reinforcement. Considering organizing peer mentoring groups in a high school for students with disabilities can help them self-realize. That evaluation against peers can help them see that they may have areas of needs and have areas of strength. And self-regulation is the ability to examine the environments and use repertoires of responses and to cope and make decisions. Or maybe we think of it as self-management. Goal setting and attainment, self-initiation, self-instruction, problem-solving, and decision-making are all falling into this characteristic of self-determination. Developing portfolios are a great way for students to present their self-management. Here we have the seminal self-determination scales for evaluating student self-determination and conducting research on student outcomes based on self-determination. The assessments break down self-determination into the constructs or essential characteristics that we just spoke of: autonomy, psychological empowerment, self-regulation, and self-realization. The ARC Self-Determination Scale by Waymeyer and Keckner, 1995, had a 72-item self-report measure. It identified strengths and limitations in the areas of self-determination and was also used in a research tool. Some of the research is being presented during this presentation. You have access to this scale and perhaps you've used it before, but it is a bit lengthy and could be difficult for a student to go through and self-rate. However, it does give opportunities to look at autonomy, self-regulation, psychological empowerment, and self-realization broken down with a scoring, a validated scoring protocol so that you can find results and use this assessment for furthering the student education and training in self-determination. Additionally, you have the AIR Self-Determination Scale by Woolman and colleagues. This one only has 24 items, which it makes a little bit easier to complete, with the purpose to assess and develop a profile of self-determination. It helps the student develop goals and objectives and helps the teacher determine instruction. And it looks at self-determination as a process between thinking, doing, and adjusting. So it's moving more toward what we actually do when we engage in self-determined behaviors. It also looks at a student's capacity for self-determined behavior versus opportunity. So a student may have capacity and not be given opportunity, or the student may not have opportunity. So that is a difference between instruction or setting up the environment. So it comes with instructions, and it is a little bit simpler and easier for a student to go through or to facilitate with a student to answer the following scaled questions. It does have some constructed response to help a more qualitative assessment of the student's abilities, and a validated scoring protocol. But more recently, the University of Kansas, under the direction of Dr. Wehmeyer, the self-determination inventory has been developed. It uses a more universal design for assessment approach. It's technology-based, and it uses the technology to make it more accessible to our students. This SDI is not just for students with IEPs or students with disabilities, but it is designed and developed and validated for all students to evaluate self-determination. It has 3 different versions: a student, a parent, educator, or an adult rating scale. The most important, obviously, is the student, but we can also look at other perspectives of student self-determination to find consistency and better ideas. But it asks questions about how the student feels about their ability to be self-determined. It's going to examine the steps in the self-determination process to make choices, to set and go after goals, and make decisions. You'll be asked to explore this as an activity in this module. I want to point out that it says one-time SDI for students, but you can use this as many times as you want for the student. It is just free without the tracking. So if it says one time, it's not going to record the results and then track progress. Some of the cool features about it include the Likert scale that allows you to drag. So you don't have to choose between a 4 or a 5. You can come somewhere exactly how you feel. Additionally,
I have what it takes to reach my goals.
You can have it read to you, and for words that are outside of the 3rd grade reading, they can be defined. So you go through the assessment. You must check every one, and at the end, it is going to give you results. Not only does it give you the results broken down into different areas and constructs of self-determination, but it also supplies suggested activities and interventions for the student. So I hope you will engage in that activity to explore this in more depth. When it comes to self-determination, we do have student participation stages. The self-awareness is only when you understand your own strengths and needs. Then you will become motivated to make change. For example, someone might realize that they have difficulty making conversation but desperately want to make friends. So, at that point, the student is motivated to work on recognizing good conversation skills to achieve those social goals. Self-advocacy happens once the student is motivated, then they can better self-advocate. Again, someone with poor conversation skills, once they can self-advocate, they might try to put themselves in situations to support those difficulties and avoid situations with high conversational demands. In career development and awareness, this goes back to self-awareness and self-advocacy. Once those are in place, you have the ability to get into a job that meets your needs, preferences, interests, and strengths. Before we end this video, we're going to watch a clip that shows the student, teacher, and parents talking about self-determination and students participating in their IEP meeting. You'll see a variety of students from elementary to high school, because once again, I want to emphasize self-determination isn't something we should begin teaching when the transition plan begins. Self-determination is something we can support all along so that the transition plan services are effective and efficient.
Is it important for people to listen to what you want?
Because if you're not heard, then you're overlooked and you're just forgotten about. So I think you should speak your mind when you need to.
That IEP is for you. It's not for me. It's for me to help you. It's my prescription for you. But that IEP is specially designed to help you and with you in mind. So if you're uncomfortable with it, or if you feel like it needs to be changed, then you need to speak up and say, no, I think this should be done, or I really need this.
I think they should be involved because their parents aren't always at school when they need help. That the kids should be there saying, this is what I need help on. This is what I need to get my work done. And their parents don't know what they do at school, so they need to be there to tell them.
Really, we're just the people that care about you. We're your support group, but it's really your meeting, and it's really all about you. And if you're not there and your voice isn't present, we're missing the most important part.
Do you go to your IEP meetings?
Every one of them.
Tell me why.
Because it's my life and I don't want someone else to run it for me.
Who best to determine what goes on in your IEP than you, the student? I mean, you know more about yourself than anyone, more than your parents, more than your teachers, guidance counselors. Only you know how you feel and what works best for you.